Cool.
Cool.
Okay. So, in watching Brigsby Bear, your new comedy drama that revolves around a children's show, that's at the core of the story, it made me think about Super Friends. I'm sure everybody, when they watch this movie, is going to have their own nostalgic touchstone, and for me it was that.
Yeah.
And thinking about, there's something about kiddie kitsch that's practically invisible when you're a kid, right? And then if you re-experience it as nostalgia, you start to think of it in a whole different way. You start to imagine the guys in horn-rimmed glasses with their cigarettes in some writer's room somewhere coming up with this crazy stuff. And then you might experience that kind of entertainment totally differently if you're seeing it for the first time as an adult. Can you talk a bit about what your own touchstones were for this? Teddy Ruxpin would be an obvious one in the look of Brigsby Bear. And what was some of the entertainment that you revisited as you were developing?
For just the television show within the movie, or also the film as a whole?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the TV show, the Brigsby Bear TV show, kind of allowed us to throw in everything. So we were like, any reference was fair game, and like it was a constant search of YouTube clips, or like we've got a pretty big VHS collection, so like pulling tapes. But I mean, you could see emails of like just links being sent back and forth, which included everything from like the He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special to Captain Kangaroo. Welcome Pooh Corner, the Great Space Roller Coaster. I don't even know if I'm saying that correct because I didn't watch it. But some things I would like discover along the way that I may not have even been obsessed with as a child, and yet there was that familiarity there that like, I feel like I know this, but I don't. But in terms of like, I guess our lives that we've shared together, Dave and I, and I don't know that this doesn't necessarily make it into the movie really. Actually, I think I could argue how it would have. But, you know, we were obsessed with like Saved by the Bell and like TJF shows growing up, and I agree with what you said that like when you watch them now, there's that element of campiness, and it is fun to imagine like the writer's room. I would feel like writing for a show like that would be the best job ever.
You've tried.
Yeah, I failed. Well, I don't say that I failed, but they didn't let me do it.
Yeah. But to write these Brigsby Bear shows within the film, you had to sort of tap into what that would be like in a way, right? There's a sort of anthropology of that, and you had to kind of, I guess, and how analytical did it get? Was it very intuitive writing?
Well, I think, it's the accumulation of all of the mythos from all of these cartoons and children's shows that gets kind of just ingrained in your head, that I think Kyle and Kevin, when they're coming up with like the jargon for what the planets' names are, and the Stardust Bandits and the Sun Soldiers and the Smile Sisters and the Wizzles, like those are you can kind of just spitball names that sound like, oh, this sounds like maybe a 80s or 90s character would sound like in those cartoon worlds. But I don't know if there's...
It's also like all kind of like if... I like in like 80s and 90s TV where they like reference like a mainstream thing but don't actually refer to what it is. I always use the specific... there was an episode of Saved by the Bell, for instance, where they refer to the Beach Buddies, but it's clear that they're talking about the Beach Boys. But I feel like anytime like Star Wars is a thing is referenced, but they like won't say Star Wars, it's like in a movie or a TV show, it'd be like, yeah, we're gonna see Space Quest or Space. Right. I feel like that's kind of what we did, was just like put these weird words together that sound as close as they can to like.
I think you guys were also kind of putting yourselves in the headspace of the Ted character, and that he, in the logic of the film, is pulling from the zeitgeist over the years. So when he started making the show for James in the 80s, whatever was out at the time, he was subconsciously or consciously regurgitating some of those either stories or characters. And
Yeah.
we have like a moment in the film where the Spencer character points out like, oh, you got Donald Duck in this, and he's like, oh no, it's Goody Goose.
Right.
And it's just like, well, yeah, Ted probably was very aware of Donald Duck and wanted to have a duck
Could
character.
just steal him.
It could
Yeah, it's
just-
pretty easy to plagiarize in a total pop
Yeah,
culture vacuum.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how much now exists of Brigsby Bear, the TV show? How many minutes of footage are there?
Pretty much within the movie, that's all we shot for the movie. That's all we were kind of able to shoot, given like budget restraints. With that being said, like there might be some more Brigsby material coming out very soon.
Sounds like a bonus feature or something, or a Christmas special.
It's the Festival of Kindness.
Yeah. So you mentioned your VHS collection. How did you get started with that? It sort of seems like that wasn't really the medium of your youth, right?
It was.
Was it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was born '84. Dave was born '85. So yeah, we had. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because there's the whole resurgence of vinyl.
Yeah.
But there is even this subculture of VHS collectors, and VHS, of course, doesn't even have the technical merits of vinyl.
Sure.
But it does have this tactile kind of quality to it. What is it about VHS that is the nostalgia factor for your own?
Yeah, certainly it's a big part. And it's interesting that you bring up there is a subculture of persons who are really into tapes. I will say that like seemingly a lot of and there's a couple documentaries about the resurgence of VHS and a lot of these people tend to be into horror films and direct to video horror features, whereas like I'm into like kid videos and educational videos and religious videos and like kind of the low production value kid shows. But yeah, I mean like it's certainly a nostalgic thing. It's like just when I walk into a thrift store and I see a cover of something that like kind of takes me back to being in Blockbuster Video as a kid and just renting the same videos over and over again. It does. It fulfills something somewhere inside of me.
Would you say time stops and you kind of have this like a tunnel vision?
I would never say that.
We'll talk about it later.
So the movie kind of struck me as this really interesting amalgam of Hot Rod, Ed Wood, and Donnie Darko. There's kind of all these elements that there's like a Venn diagram of the movie would start with this nostalgia and pop culture, this grief and trauma psychology, and the creative impulse, right, put into action.
Yeah.
So if the starting point, I assume, was kind of the nostalgia and the pop culture, how did that evolve into these deeper themes? What was the process that got you there?
I think it was, I mean, like, the initial conceit of the movie, before there was, like, an idea for a full movie, it was just those first 10 minutes of the film, where we kind of don't exactly know where we are, and where we're kind of introduced to the Brigsby universe. It was only over time, as I thought more about what this movie would be, the film became more about the world outside of that. And so naturally, I think, you do have these almost sections of James's life and his experiences, and I guess through that growth, you get to kind of delve into all of those subjects.
Mm.
Yeah.
I would also add, more film references that we talked a lot about in terms of tone and just general inspiration for the film. Being There was a film that we looked at a lot, the Peter Sellers, Hal Ashby film, Truman Show, Dogtooth, even like Elf, like just that fish out of water. I mean, it was really important to us to stay as sincere as possible, given how silly that this script could go. We thought that the most interesting approach play it as realistically as possible, as if this were a national news story, and that these characters were going through real legitimate emotions.
Yeah. And since it is sort of, it's a kind of cinematic coming out for you guys, it's your first big feature film, you had to have a kind of, there was a parallel between what James is going through and what you were going through in terms of
Sure.
The empowerment of being able to tell your story, even though it was literally your own life story.
Right.
Can you talk about that? And were you conscious of that during the process?
I think maybe at some points, I think it became the most prevalent when we finished the edit and like we were then presenting this movie at Sundance.
Your baby.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
the same way that kind of James has to present his own thing. But yeah, it's hard not to feel the parallels of like friends having fun making something together, because that's truly we've made a career out of that.
Right, your co-writer is also a childhood friend. You
Yeah.
guys knew each other since middle school?
Yeah, we met him in 7th grade. Just we had a brief friendship, a couple of years with him before he had to move. He's in a Navy family. They ended up moving to Oklahoma, but we re-found him back in Los Angeles, and it was kind of kismet, like that Kyle had this great idea for this film, but had never written a film, and we were going off to SNL, and our one screenwriter friend was,
Kind of pounding away at it while like we were losing it and
it was
trying to maneuver through this thing we'd never gone through.
It was
The machine.
so
Yeah.
crucial that he really laid the groundwork for it, and then Kyle could come in and add all of the touches of his sensibility on top of the great structure that Kevin laid out. And
You talk about navigating the machine, and that was one thing I wanted to touch on is you have, it sounds kind of complicated, like the getting the production together, obviously, but also in terms of your production partners, like you had Lonely Island, kind of nurturing the project, and then later Lord Miller, and I guess Good Neighbor. Do you see Good Neighbors moving into becoming its own sort of Lonely Island
Well, I mean,
space?
I think like we see this slightly outside of the Good Neighbor universe to some degree, but yes, I mean like I always want to. I think we always want to collaborate with each other and our friends. So yeah, I mean like, yeah, in a perfect world, like, we're running our own mini studio where like all of the people we love to work with can just come in and out and make their thing.
yeah, it's become very clear to us over the years, both with our buddies in Good Neighbor and friends we've made over the last 10 years, that our most favorite experiences as filmmakers have always come when we love the people on set that we're working with. I mean, that maybe goes without saying, most people do. It's just whenever there's like a familial feel when you're telling a story or producing something, it just makes that experience that much more special. And this is obviously a great example of or Brigsby Bear is a great example of best friends who have always wanted to do something, just doing whatever they can to get it into the world. And
Yeah. Well, one of the things I found interesting about that, from a story point of view, is that there's this kind of conflict in the story between James's way of dealing with his problems and the world's conventional wisdom about how to solve these problems, and like the clinical psychology approach. And I love that message that there's sort of like no one-size-fits-all way to solve grief or trauma.
it's so circumstantial.
Yeah.
It really is. I like about the script that Kyle and Kevin wrote that it's also kind of a coming of age for the supporting characters around James, that they have to kind of, through the passion that they see in James, they find a passion themselves in this new approach at how to create the best relationship with him, given how unique his experience is. And yeah, maybe that for one, in a different situation that a family goes through, like that is not the healthiest thing to embrace the kid's dream if it truly is disturbing or whatever. I mean, you can't use it. You can't use this story as a template necessarily for.
I can't use this as an instruction manual.
but yeah, we just thought it was such an interesting story to tell, and that we felt that this particular sequence of events that played out seemed honest and genuine, and yeah, we just we always wanted it to just feel heartwarming and not too silly. And
I want to talk a little bit about the character of James before I'm out of time here, in terms of how you develop that character. He feels like he could be a little bit on the spectrum almost, based on what he's been through. And there's similarities to your Man on the Street character as well. How did you find him in terms of personality, but also in tone, to strike the right balance between getting the laughs when they're appropriate, but also grounding him?
Well, I mean, I think the goal was always to keep it as grounded as possible, and I think credit is due to Dave, because Dave was consistently pushing realism and honesty. Though with that being said, in the process of shooting, we would do takes let's try this a little broader, just to have levels. But I was always operating on from the perspective of make this person as human as possible. And then, but yeah, you say oh, he's, and I agree with you. There are similarities to characters I've performed before. But I think I'd like to think that the way he reacts is genuine, and he could be a real person, because the world is a scary place, and I feel there's a party scene, for instance, where he's obviously out of place, but over time he kind of comes into himself, and it's his first time making friends. But he's in a very he has a specific backstory, and obviously has never experienced anything close to the things around him. But I myself, Kyle, and I'm sure mostly everyone in the world goes through that, even just knowing the world around. You know what I mean? We all struggle to interact, and we all struggle to even speak sentences sometimes. So
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So I think I was just kind of pulling from that.
Yeah. So I do want to ask one question about Saturday Night Live and the culture of the show. People often talk about the kind of competitive nature of living in that world and fighting for your material and that sort of thing. But it's also changed with technology, right? Now, when there is a cut sketch, say, it becomes a viral video, and people can see that material. How do you see that culture at the moment? And maybe you could also talk a little bit about. I think it's interesting that the show always has that kind of rhythm to. The beginning of the show is very mainstream, and then usually by
gets weirder and weirder.
It gets weirder and weirder, which I love about it. My favorite stuff's always at the end of the show.
Sure.
Anyway, can you talk a little bit about how you see the show right now?
Well, that's a credit to Lauren, is he does like to have that scope of sensibility there, and give guys like us who have maybe a more specific sense of humor a little nook of the show to try out weirder stuff, and sometimes it cuts through, and sometimes it doesn't, but he's always, I think, over the years been interested in trying different stuff, and it's hard because we struggle with the notion of it would be really nice to get a bigger audience to appreciate this stuff, but it seems like consistently we go back to, some of our content does alienate audiences and it can be uncomfortable, and there is an audience for that, but it's certainly not that broad of an audience. And
it is nice though, these pieces that get cut have a chance to live somewhere,
Yeah.
and that people can watch them. So it's like there's certainly disappointment when your sketches keep on getting cut, and it's like you're not even on the show. But it's rad that there's an outlet that people can see what we do.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm out of time here, but may our minds be stronger tomorrow.
I hope so.
Thank
Good
you
luck
so
with the
much.
film.
Really appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thanks off.